Welcome to Locking In on Security with Havoc Shield. Today's installment is called Forgiveness, Permission, and Shadow IT. In many organizations, the IT person is seen as the gatekeeper. When an employee finds a useful piece of technology, they often wonder, will my IT person approve of this? As they stare at their web browser with their mouse pointer hovering over the buy button or the create account button or the download button, the moment of truth arrives. Will they ask for permission from IT, or will they click and risk the idea that they might need to ask for forgiveness later? Today, we're very pleased to be joined for this discussion of forgiveness, permission, and shadow IT by Jeff Reed, IT Director of Interapt. You might also know him as Jeff the IT Guy from YouTube. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Phil, for having me.
You bet. Great to see you. Jeff, in organizations I've been in, I've seen shadow IT take the form of everything from productivity apps that one team in the company decided to use on their own to employees deciding to keep their own backups on external hard drives that they bought. What forms of shadow IT do you see the most these days? What types of applications or hardware? And which examples of shadow IT are the most concerning for you?
You know, if you're in healthcare, it's going to be a lot different than if you're working, for example, like I do now as a consultant for custom software, right? And so in healthcare, the things that you're going to look at are a lot more stringent than what they would be, working with a bunch of devs who are obviously pretty keen on technology itself. And so coming from a healthcare background, I do know that the things that I've seen a lot where anything that would request permission to like their Gmail, so like using SSO or JWT to log in to another service. External media is a big one. It really is. It's a problem that you face all the time.
That's real wily because you don't know. Someone plugs in a flash drive into their USB port and you ask them, a few months later, hey, have you ever saved anything off to removable media? There's a real good chance that they don't even remember ever having done that. It was for some kind of short-term need to get them out of a pinch, right? That's the kind of thing that's easily forgotten.
Yeah, it is. I've had employees who would take medical records and put them on their USB drive and take them home to look at it. Or, it may have not been like that stringent, but it may be something that have to do with a client or a patient.
Right.
Whether that, it could have been an order from a judge or something like that. Anything that contains PHI, they would, I've seen it happen that way, that they would put it on removable media.
It's
and
funny.
At that
it's
point,
funny
we
because
could lock it down.
The way you talk about it, it's like an employee that is actually trying to do more work. They're going to be headed home, not near the office, and they wanted to take some work with them to finish. So sometimes it's not ill will, or it's not someone being malicious. It's they thought that would genuinely help them do their job better, right?
Right. Yeah, it wasn't anything that was malicious. I have seen maliciousness before. It typically didn't involve a removable USB, but
right.
No, it wasn't malicious. They had zero intent. It's just that they wanted to take their work home.
Yeah. So removable media is a problem. You also talked about SSO, where is this the scenario where you're using your G Suite account to authenticate to another web app? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah. So, yeah, whenever you try and authenticate with another web app, you can use Google Sign-In is everywhere, right?
Right.
And so if your organization uses G Suite or Google Sign-In or Gmail, for example, you can sign into all sorts of web apps with that, and it gives permissions.
Sure.
If you're not really super tech savvy, you might see something really cool that you think is going to be like that you can do at work or whatever, or it could even be like an online game that you want to play with your friends.
Right.
You go ahead, you give permissions to your Gmail, it's your contacts and all sorts of stuff. Not knowingly, you've opened that up to someone who could have malicious intent.
I think there's also this kind of trend of people that they've got a work Gmail account, a work G Suite account, a home Gmail account, maybe another Gmail account that they use. And when you're in that quick moment when you can sign in with Google, we've got a lot on our minds these days, and it's not inconceivable that someone just accidentally clicks the work email address instead of the home with no intention of connecting that game or that web app to work in any way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sometimes I have known people who use their business email, their work email, as their personal email.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and so they've worked for a company for 6 or 7 years, and it's like, well, it's the only email address I've ever known.
Right.
And so they use it for everything.
That's probably a whole other locking in on security session, is the mixed use email when employees have been kind of long-term employees. Well, as you think about kind of a big part of the solution with regard to minimizing shadow IT, we've talked about removable media, SSO to third-party web apps. I think part of it is persuading employees in the company that it's I'll say safe to ask IT their opinion about some technological need, rather than just directly going and setting up that account or making that purchase, getting to a point where they feel comfortable that they can go and discuss these topics with IT and have a reasonable discussion where they don't feel like they're just bound to be told, no. Is that a fair point, that kind of creating that comfort between IT and the rest of the company is part of the solution to make it safe for people to feel like they should come to IT for these types of decisions?
Yeah, that's a safe assumption. Unfortunately, IT folks typically have the stereotype that we're down in a basement, hidden away from the world. No one knows who we are or what we do.
You don't look like you're in a basement at all.
No, I'm not. It's just that's just the misconception about us. It is a stereotype. Sometimes we do have off-putting personalities, and saying no it comes very easy to us.
Sure.
Almost in a condescending way, right?
So that is the curse of that. Kind of the threat landscape and the risk landscape associated with the pieces of technology that people ask about, and so that's hard for you. That all has to factor into your decision, while still, I guess, somehow remaining approachable and open to the discussion that there might be a business need that merits the risk. Is that the right way to think of it?
Yeah. As IT professionals, we do need to be open to listening to our coworkers. For example, if our coworkers in the accounting department need some new accounting software or something that's going to help, they're probably going to know more about accounting than what I do.
Sure.
But when it comes to being able to scope out a product, it needs to really, it's about teamwork. It needs to be the IT team and the accounting team who goes in together and looks at that. Because like I said, the accounting team, they're going to have things that they need, that they want to see in software. And IT, of course, has a set of security policies that they have to adhere to.
Right. It really takes both sides. I mean, the accounting team, if they need some specialized software to run a particular amortization table, it's not that IT needs to check to see if the underlying computations are right or anything like that. That's the accounting people have to figure that out. But some basic understanding of threat exposure to help just quickly make sure that it's safe, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're not in IT, really, it's very hard for you to know exactly what goes in to making a decision, like talking to vendors, and purchasing software. And that's from a high level, like enterprise software. And I know this is more towards like, do I use Canva or Filmora.io, something small like that. But I have seen people try to make large enterprise decisions, not knowing actually what goes into it, and not knowing whether it has to be hosted on-prem or if it's going to be hosted in the cloud, what permissions or rights it needs, the cost of it. Just there's a whole ecosystem that has to be taken into account.
Right. And you talked about on-prem or cloud as an example of something where, it's plausible that an employee in a non-technical function might be evaluating a piece of software without that occurring to them. And it seems to me that in that sort of context, that there's a non-threatening, comfortable way for IT to kind of help raise the team's IQ about here's some of the questions that we think about when we're making sure that this solution is going to be secure and maintainable for us. And I just think that in that example that you gave, kind of coaching the accounting team through, we need to understand whether this is on-prem or in cloud. That's a reasonable level-headed discussion that isn't jumping straight to a no or a yes. It's just talking it over, right?
Right. Yeah. I think I made I was coming up with some Twitter post, I think it was yesterday or something. It was like, there's no I in team, but
Right.
there is an I and T in IT. So it's like it's a single player, and a team sport kind of deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So just nonsense like that. And it really is, it needs to be very collaborative, but at the same time, sometimes you do have to rely on a single person's expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where if you've got two people who are SMEs and they come together as a team, they're going to make a better decision than what just one person can ultimately.
And that should also set the stage for it to be safe to help that person feel safe that they can, the next time something comes up, they can come back to IT again, because it was a collaborative discussion. It wasn't just here's the request, no, that's denied. It was, let's talk over what you're using this for, and cloud versus on-prem as an example. And that feels like that creates a really good collaborative environment. So that kind of leads into my next question, which is, are there kinds of shadow IT that you're actually not worried about? Are there any examples where if someone came to you and said, hey, I was thinking about downloading this particular thing or purchasing this particular piece of hardware, where you'd tell them, as long as it meets your needs, go for it? Or are there any examples like that, or does IT need to be involved in kind of everything?
I think it goes back to depending on, what part, what business sector you're in. So currently, I don't really care if my guys want to download a different IDE as far as my developers go. I mean, they don't have to come to me and be like, hey, I want to use Eclipse, but I don't want to use IntelliJ. I don't care.
Yeah, and that's a perfect point, right? Because that's something that's local to their workstation, right?
Yeah.
And if managed correctly, doesn't cause any additional data flows in or out that wouldn't have otherwise happened, right?
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And and then there's some purchases that typically, if it costs money, because it does come out of my IT budget, I want to be involved in some way, right? And it doesn't have to be that I'm the final yay or nay, or I've got to whatever, but I would at least like to know about it. Like if we're going to start using a new UX, UI software, I mean, honestly, I don't care what that team chooses. Because they're the experts in UX and UI. I can, barely write my name legibly. So, I mean, I can't tell how they're going to use it, but it's at least something I need to take account of as far as, my IT budget goes.
And that seems fair. I mean, to at least be part of the discussion of anything where there's accountability on your end related to purchasing authority or budgets, et cetera. Yeah. But there's sort of the respect for, you're the UI UX expert, not you, Jeff, but the teammate you're working with. You're the UI UX expert. Trust you to make the right decision in terms of the functionality that you need. But if it's coming out of my budget, we still need to sort of scope what the cost would be and the impact, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. So here's the tough question. What's the future of shadow IT? Do we end up in a world where we, I don't know, return to a very strict, centrally managed IT in some future time frame, or do we end up in a world where shadow IT kind of proliferates in variety and quantity, and we just have to get better at proactively engaging people to make smart decisions when you're not in the room? Where do you see shadow IT as a trend going in the next few years?
Ultimately, I think people will still try and do whatever it is that they want to do. I don't think there's really any way to change that unless you completely lock everything down, and then people might feel that it hinders their innovation.
Right.
or hinders their job in some way. And that I've been told before that IT doesn't know what their job is, so why does it matter? What I think about it, um, or that I don't know what it's like on the front lines. I've been told that before too, which is fair because I didn't. And so what I did actually at that point in time was I took a whole week and I went and visited. I worked for a healthcare company, and I went and visited 5 of our clinics, one every single day. And I worked with every single person in that clinic, whether that was the receptionist or the admin, the director of the facility, a case manager, a clinician. I worked with every single one to see what their data flow and what their job was like, so that I could better make decisions about what it was that they needed. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
some people call those follow me sessions where,
yeah.
hey, just go about your work day, and I'm going to kind of hang out with you and see what you do. And I'll try not to be a nuisance, but I want to kind of learn what goes into the job you do.
Yeah. And, at the end of the week, it really gave me a better understanding and more of an appreciation for what it was that they had to deal with. Cause we were looking at, EMRs and CRMs and, a new payment software and practice management software. We were looking at all these solutions, and I was the main decision maker on them. It was my final say. But it gave me a better appreciation for them, and it actually increased their respect of me because I actually took the time and showed that I had an interest in learning what it was that they had to do. Now, sure. I've also had to where, we had someone who watched 36 hours of Netflix during a 40-hour work week.
Who would do that?
And so that, of course, that meant that we had to block Netflix on all of our networks, which caused.
But kind of surgically because you observed that it wasn't that you're spending days and nights figuring out what list of sites we're going to block. Yeah. It was more out of necessity, right?
Yeah, it is a surgical strike. Yep. We took a scalpel to it, and there were several sites, of course, that we had to take care of. Like there's like Netflix. We even had to get rid of Facebook on our networks. It was causing a lot of issues, and so you can be surgical and effective without being a tyrant.
So shadow IT, it'll continue to proliferate, but kind of just building relationships with your colleagues so that there's some mutual trust, and then being surgical about specific examples where, we can't have someone watching Netflix all day. Is that kind of the combination of how we manage this?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's not going to be possible for every single business. I mean, if you take a look at someone like, for example, Humana, who has 45,000 employees, I don't think that their VP of IT is going to go spend, a day with every single employee, right? They never get anything done. That's all they do. If they spent a single day with every single employee, it'd take 45,000 days. However many years that is, they'd probably die before it ever happened. So, it's not plausible in that sort of scenario, but it is there. Of course, they've got, different groups and departments that are all managed by someone, and they've got management, and you can.
But the concept of mutual trust still translates to any organization size, right? I mean, in a smaller organization, it might take the form of you doing kind of follow me's and hanging out with each employee one-on-one for a couple hours. In a larger organization, there might be different trust building sort of approaches, but I think what you're getting at is the concept of creating that trust so that these discussions are ones that get raised rather than made in isolation, right?
Yeah, there is that. And of course, when you've got a larger enterprise, you've got focus groups, and they come together and they go to their department head, and they go through all that about what software they need. And of course, if you're in healthcare, typically it doesn't matter what you want to do as far as shadow IT goes. You're only going to have permission to do about, 5 to 10 things. And that's the things that you're allowed to do, and you're not going to get around it.
Sure.
Because of PHI and the fact that it is so stringent. It's the same thing. And it's if you work as a contractor for the U.S. government, there's only going to be a certain amount of things that you can do. And shadow IT is non-existent pretty much. I can tell you that. I worked as a contractor for the feds, and there's no shadow IT there. I mean, they'll find
that might be one end of the one end of the spectrum is is a federal government role where shadow IT is perhaps as stringently forbidden as possible. And another end of the spectrum is maybe the small business where there's a broader baseline of trust and people trying to make the right decisions, but still a need for IT to be a part of the conversation as shadow IT because just naturally proliferates more in that type of environment.
It's a balancing act, really. It's like most things in the world. It's all about compromise, really, or meeting in the middle, you could say. You can't be too far one side and too far the other. You kind of have to be in the middle. It's it reminds me of whenever I was in business school, about Theory X and Theory Y management, right? You have some people who are Theory X, some who are Theory Y, and you got some who lean towards the middle. And in all reality, the best way to manage is that you encompass both of them. And with certain employees, you're going to have to be Theory X, certain employees, you're going to have to be Theory Y. But most of the time, you can go straight down the middle, and you're going to be a pretty decent manager. It's all about knowing and using your experiences of which way you need to go and having both of those tools in your toolbox.
Jeff, with that thought of about judgment and meeting in the middle and compromise, I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us for Forgiveness, Permission, and Shadow IT. As we think about employees in that crucial moment of a technology purchase, download, or install, I think we can all appreciate the complexity of the situation. Employees just wanting to be productive, and IT directors just wanting employees to stay safe and make sure that the company is protected. And all of us just wanting streamlined ways to stay busy and productive. Jeff, thanks for joining us today to share your perspective on forgiveness, permission, and shadow IT. And stay safe out there.
Thanks, Phil.